right, who won the coin toss?
I did.
So, all right, okay, that means that.
He wants to go last.
Want to go, so you're going to give the second opening statement?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, and Sheriff Beth.
So that means in the closing statement, I go last.
Right.
Okay.
All right, all right, I'm going to quickly
Hold on. They need to use the mic that's up there.
Oh, yeah.
This one?
No.
We have two mics here, folks.
So we share this
The
one?
hand mic is for the room, and the stand mics are for Kenosha Community Television. So we'll ask you to share the mic.
I got it.
The hand mic, because otherwise people in the room won't be able to hear you well. I'm going to quickly review the forum guidelines. For those of you who are here, the candidates already know. All the questions have been chosen by me and are going to be focusing a lot on the questions that have been submitted tonight and earlier in the week by members of the audience and those who are going to be watching and listening later. I'm going to try to address you using your last names for those who are listening to the audio-only portion of this later. So I'll talk about Sheriff Beth and Mr. Zoerner and Mr. Beth and Mr. Zoerner. Not because we're not friends, but because the people on the radio won't be able to tell the differences easily. We want them to know who's speaking. Questions have to be relating to the scope of the office, of course, and we're asking the candidates to remain on topic. If I think they're wandering, I will let them know. We expect courtesy will be given to the person who has the floor. I'm asking the audience to keep as silent as possible during this affair, except for applauding after the candidates' opening statements, and again at the very end at their closing statements. We want to have as much time for questions and answers as possible, so hoots and hollers and applause all during the forum will just take away from time from serious consideration of the issues. So we ask you to refrain from that, please. I will we're here so that they will know what their timing is. We are going to have 3.5-minute opening statements from each of the gentlemen. And you've seen that drawn earlier this evening. We're going to have questions, and then the questions, we're going to give you 2.5 minutes to respond to a question. And both candidates will answer the same question. We'll alternate among you. If I get confused, I'm sure one of you or someone in the audience will straighten me out. At the end, we're going to give you 5 minutes to make a closing statement and sum things up, and we'll go in the reverse order. So we are going to start with Sheriff Beth. Instead of trying to introduce each candidate's qualifications, we're going to let the candidates speak for themselves. So we're going to let Sheriff Beth open with your 3.5-minute opening statement. Sheriff Beth.
Thank you. Test.
Press the button.
Lights
You
are
have a
on.
green light. You have a green light?
Test. Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
We'll start now.
All right, I'm David Beth, and I've been the sheriff for 36 years. I've been in the sheriff's department for 36 years and sheriff for 16. And I've done a lot of different roles on the sheriff's department. And let's see. Started off on patrol and went to work with Naval Intelligence for 2 years buying drugs. Went to the DARE program in 1989, and I taught the DARE program, brought that to Kenosha County in 1989. Taught about 10,000 students the DARE program. And then in 2000, I ran for the office of sheriff. And I ran that time as a Democrat. And I believe both of us have changed parties. But there's a difference. And in 2002, I switched from a Democrat to Republican. I found that was a better fit for me. And the people and the beliefs were a better fit for me. And I was very proud that I ran as a Democrat. And I was very proud that I ran as a Republican, and I've held that ever since. I've not once, since I've changed, told anyone I'm a Republican, but I'm still a Democrat. So I think it's, as far as integrity and honesty, the office of sheriff, those are huge. And being what you say you are is a major part of being the sheriff, not running on a different party and saying you're something different. The office of sheriff is very global. By the statute of the state of Wisconsin, the sheriff is supposed to appear, or I'm sorry, has to work 1 day a year. I have far exceeded that. The office of sheriff does many, many things. We're in charge of patrol, detentions. The K-Dog unit, the drug unit, it's a consortium of the Kenosha Police Department and also the Twin Lakes Police Department and the Sheriff's Department. The tactical team is run by the Sheriff's Office. We have the Marine unit. We have many, many moving parts. Our jail is actually the second largest jail in the state of Wisconsin. Not exactly something to be proud of, but it's a fact. And since I took office, our local population has held the same. Different programming that we've done inside the jail, different programs that the courts have done, the district attorney has done, have been working. And they are keeping people from coming back into our jail. Today we have a little over 800 inmates, and our local population is about 480. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip on that one. That number is actually less than it was when I took office in 2003. So all the programs we're doing in the jail are working. They're making a difference. Since I took office, we have grown the federal inmate program. We've brought in, you're waving at me, is that the reason?
Yeah, it's time.
My time's up?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll get more and deeper into those credentials in a little bit. Mr. Zoerner.
Thank you. Good evening. Whoa, it's on.
It works.
I'd like to thank Forward Kenosha for holding this event and for all of you for showing up tonight. Thank you so much. Over my professional law enforcement career, I've been blessed to serve the citizens of this country at the White House and throughout the country as a United States Marine. I came home to serve my community, and I'm doing so now as a sergeant on the Kenosha County Sheriff's Office. Early in my career, I found empathy for victims. I wanted to do more. It wasn't long after that I was invited to join the board of directors for Women and Children's Horizons. I jumped at that chance. I've been on that board for 15 years. The mission's so important, I've never considered getting off of it. I have two sisters that have both been victims of physical and sexual violence. I won't sit idle while violence is being done against anyone. I'm a certified law enforcement instructor by the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Standards Board. I teach in the criminal justice program at Gateway Technical College. I teach our student recruits how to stay safe, how to keep our communities safe, how to keep you and your family safe. I'm very proud of a progressive message that I teach those kids. They're very young, I say kids, but they're very young adults. My students understand how volatile our communities are currently and how being part of the problem is so important and what they're able to do as police officers to help that mission. As a deputy, I served as a school resource officer at Wilmot Union High School. Some of those people are here tonight. Thank you for staying with me. This may be the most important time I've spent professionally, keeping those students and the staff safe. It's like a small community of 1,100 people, almost 1,200 sometimes. I work with school administrators and the staff to develop training protocols for school shootings. I train the entire student body and staff repeatedly on how to facilitate those protocols safely. It was extremely important and it went well. The opioid crisis, it's not going away. The epidemic is going to take monumental collaboration. Collectively, we're going to have to organize ourselves, cross-train, work with all the different entities. Just kind of discussed that with Mr. Iaquinta before this, how a collaboration can be effective, and it has been in this community in many ways. We can beat this epidemic, but only as a team. The sheriff alluded to integrity in this introduction, talking about my party change. Well, I've made that party change, just as he did, and it's going to work for me, and it's working very well. I've met with many unions, labor groups, Chiefs of police have endorsed me, firefighters, fire unions, UAW, AFL-CIO, municipal administrators, and school administrators. And I believe this is due to a career of protecting families, doing well with the community, and getting results. I want to be part of your team as the Sheriff of Kenosha County. I've prepared myself for it. I have the professional community support to be successful, and I'm asking you to support me as Sheriff. I'm looking forward to this forum.
Thank you. Great. Audience is paying attention. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, you've both been involved in law enforcement for some time and have distinguished careers. You're running for election in the fall of 2018. And this is not the Kenosha of my youth in the 50s, and it isn't even the Kenosha of 15 years ago. Lots is changing. I wonder if each of you gentlemen could tell me and the audience how your experience, training, relates to the future problems of Kenosha in particular, and the things you see as being most important in the 3 to 5 years ahead. And we're going to start with Sheriff Beth.
Okay. The future, part of what we've been doing for the last, since I started here in 1982, I used to run radar by Ace Hardware because that was the county back then on Highway 50. The city is expanding rapidly west. The city is growing. We've got many people moving up here from Illinois or Indiana, and actually from Milwaukee coming down. We are an island of really good things. We've got a great school district. We have great people. We have a great police department. We've got, whether east or west of the interstate, we've got great resources to help people. But we're growing. Foxconn is going to change this community extremely rapidly. Uline, I made a presentation there today, and to see what they're doing and what they're building. The people are moving here. It's going to change dramatically. The growth that we're going to have as far as calls for service, as far as building houses, the traffic, accidents, drugs coming in our community. We already know that we have some gang members that come up from Chicago and they try to do some damage here. They've done that before. We have got to be responsive to everything that's happening. We've been working very hard with the district attorney's office, the county executive's office, the county health department toward the opioid crisis. And we're working very hard to try to get people who are addicted. The opioid crisis isn't something we're going to arrest our way out of or incarcerate our way out of. And we've been working very much toward getting the help they need, rather than arresting people for opiate issues, getting them the help they need, getting them to the resources, I guess, that can help them. We now carry Narcan in our cars. We also have a Vivitrol program inside our jail, and as they come out, to help reduce their need for heroin. So there's a lot of things we need to accomplish. We need to keep working with the schools. The sheriff is responsible for every single school district in its county, and I've been doing that. Every letter, every grant that they got, I was part of. I signed their letter. Many of the schools that were there, we get 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes? All right, got it. I'm done. I'll cover that one later. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Zoerner, what about relating to the future?
What parts of my experience and training are going to help us solve problems of the future? As I described in my introduction, I'm a certified trainer for the State of Wisconsin Law Enforcement Standards Board, and we focus on this in the academy and in the training for the young adults, young officers. As everyone here knows, the opioid crisis is tremendous, and it is still debilitating our community and taking our lives. It's the collaborative effort that I work on, and I have worked on with all the different municipalities and maintain those friendships. And with those collaborations, we work with the county government. We've been very successful with Crisis. The medical examiner's office has kits now. Okay, so these collaborations are utilizing all these different agencies that go after the same funds. And this has been effective in slowing down our death rate and our overdose rate. I believe it's called This Can Save Your Life, and it's a packet that all these different agencies are distributing. This collaboration is very important to us. My training with the Kenosha County Deputy Sheriff's Association, I believe the sheriff did as well. I served as the president for several years. This is one of the ways that I explained to the organized labor unions locally as to what my intentions were and how I was going to assist us in keeping the staff that we have, which is a problem right now. All right, so a shortfall in law enforcement personnel is a crisis right now, and I've been working for that already. Our school safety is obviously a tremendous situation for us in our community and the country, excuse me. And as a school resource officer, like I said, I work with with the administrators and other entities. And when I did these trainings, I didn't do them by myself. I brought in other agencies. I brought Pleasant Prairie. I brought our TRT, Technical Response Team, to help me assist, train the student body, some of which are here now, and to make a real valid impact. So it's that experience and that training and continuing to build those relationships that I believe will help me in the future.
Thank you. I'm impressed by the fact that both of you have changed political parties. And I wonder if you would just comment on that. Is there a Republican way to be a sheriff or a Democratic way to be a sheriff? Should this be really a non-political office in your opinions?
Now, and I go second?
We're going to switch. Yeah, we'll keep alternating. Yeah.
Right.
So I go first, correct? Okay. I laid that down, confused everybody. All right. Is there a way to be a Republican or is there a way to be a Democratic sheriff? I believe there are a lot of Republican sheriffs, but I do believe personally it should be a nonpartisan position. If you're doing it correctly, the position correctly, I don't think your political party should matter. And I've asked many people in politics as to why they think this is the situation, and no one really had a fantastic answer, but one of the answers that has occurred to me is police officers, typically who become sheriffs, not always, but typically, aren't politicians by nature. They may become that way after decades in the office, but initially they need that assistance. They need a political party to organize them, show them what to do. It's very overwhelming. Several people here in the audience have run for office, and we just discussed that. It's overwhelming. Asking people for money, building support networks, going through all the paperwork, trying to do it legally, it's difficult. So I don't think you're going to get political parties out of the sheriff race, at least in Wisconsin. I would love to see that happen. I think it should, just like the judiciary. I believe that's the case.
Thank you. Beth.
No, I don't think that one party serves the office of sheriff better. I think either one would do just fine. I think what the important part is, and I go back to kind of where I alluded at the beginning, is just being true to who you are. And if you're a Republican, that's fantastic. When I first wanted to run for office, I was told that the only way you can win in Kenosha County is to be a Democrat. And I really didn't have a strong feeling one way or the other. And I ran as a Democrat, and I learned during that race what it was like to be both. And the second time I ran, the Republican Party asked me if I would switch, and I said, teach me about the Republican Party's ways. And they did, and I didn't agree with all of them, but I agreed with more of them. I fit in. And I go back to when I ran. Either way I ran, I was very proud of that office and that partisanship that I chose. I didn't switch because I thought I would win or I would be better in one or the other. I know that I fit better with the Republican Party, but do I agree with everything they do? No. For the office of sheriff, does it matter? No. I mean, here even with Dave, he went to the President Trump's inauguration, and So does it really matter one way or the other? I don't know that it does. I think we both believe that some of us have Republican thoughts and some of us have Democratic thoughts. But which way we go and what we do, it doesn't matter.
Thank you. I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that have been submitted tonight and by email. We have a lot of very interesting ones. The first one I'm going to take up for Sheriff Beth to begin is about human trafficking. Now, what are the current numbers on Kenosha's human trafficking as you understand them? What's being done and what would you do to continue to make a more significant impact on reducing this problem? It's a very complex one. Sheriff Beth.
Human trafficking is a problem here, and part of it is, and it's going to grow, is because, and truthfully, I didn't believe this. 5-10 years ago, I didn't believe this because I didn't see it. It wasn't something that's addressed. It's not something that you deal with easily. But as I look back to even my career, part of what I would do undercover, I would pretend to be a sailor, and I'd go in different places, and we would look for prostitution. And I didn't completely understand it back then. I didn't understand how people were being, I thought if you were held against your will, you were handcuffed, you were taped, you were, a knife was to your throat or something along that line, but it doesn't work that way. And I've learned a lot. The hotels, the internet, and the ability to, and a lot of it is sex trafficking around here. We have caught people for labor, and we've caught people in trucks coming up the interstate. So we do have to deal with that, but I think one of our biggest issues as far as human trafficking is sex trafficking. And with Foxconn and all the growth that's going on around here, it's going to get worse. We're going to have construction workers that are close, going to be staying in our hotels, they're going to be renting apartments, and whether we want to believe it or not, which I struggled at the beginning, that also brings in human trafficking. The truck stops. I hear that our truck stops around here, and really more in Racine, have people that go more door to door to the trucks. So the way we deal with it, we have detectives, we work with Pleasant Prairie, we work with the Kenosha Police Department to do sting operations. And part of the struggle is when we find these people, when we talk to them, when we arrest them, they're not as cooperative as I would think they would be. I would think that anyone that was caught in a human trafficking ring would ask for more assistance, and they don't. A lot of times they disappear, so it's a struggle. So keeping up the enforcement, keeping up what we're doing inside our own county and working with other counties and trying to do the sting operations, I think is what we got to do.
You asked initially for human trafficking numbers. I don't have specific numbers for human trafficking. I've been to several events over the last 6 months. And we train it very little at the department. It's difficult. Budget dollars are very short for in-service training. We have done some human trafficking and in-service a few years ago, but it's been a little while. As a board member of Women and Children's Horizons, I was able to bring our Hispanic advocate forward to assist in our training, and she provided training for us for all the departments in the county through our in-service at Gateway, which was fantastic. And what we learned, I started training this in my Introduction to Criminal Justice classes at Gateway, so I got more of an interest in it and a little bit better resource, actually. Some of the academic resources were pretty good. So it puts us onto the internet. So what I found, and I learned because I interviewed these ladies, is that Sheriff alluded to the fact that it's difficult to get information out of them or get them to give you or ask for more help. The reason being is these young women, in particular the sex trade, some of it's indentured servitude. The problem that they have is their captors sometimes start out as what are called coyotes, bringing them forward, bringing them across the border, and then things change once they get here. But the reality is that they threaten their lives, and they threaten the lives of their families back in their villages in, well, it could be Mexico or many different countries south. But so the problem with getting accurate numbers is there's such a difficulty enforcing it, and there's so much difficulty getting them to communicate. We did have a lady, actually sisters, at our shelter for women and children's horizons, and she was out east, and she would escape and come back, and we would try to help her, and then she would end up going back. That's based on the fear of what's going to happen. So in this area, we do have sex trafficking, labor trafficking, like this indentured servitude, and the numbers I don't have, but they're staggering, and it's much more prevalent than people think. Thank you.
That brings me a question from a member of the audience titled, "What Can I Do?" And this may relate to the topic we just covered. In addition to being a law-abiding citizen, what things can I do as an individual to assist law enforcement? Police Department has a neighborhood watch program. What do you advise people to do who want to be cooperative and maybe help solve that problem, or others in the community? I think we're ready to start with Mr. Zoerner.
What can a citizen do to help the police with investigations? Mr. Wambolt is here, and that's pretty much the bane of his existence at the KPD. I'm glad I've been through some of your trainings. What can a citizen do? You can always be a good witness. I advocate for people to be witnesses and pay attention and take photographs and have surveillance cameras at your home and your business. But should you fight, if you're not physically capable of fighting, I want everyone to defend themselves the best they can, save their own lives, protect their families, but don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't be a vigilante. Always try to escape, never give up. But always report crimes, never be apathetic, and that's it.
Sheriff, Beth.
It's easy, and Mr. Zoerner touched on it. Get involved. Be involved with the community. Know your neighborhood. Know your community. Know the kids in the neighborhood. Be good witnesses. Call the police or the sheriff's department. It's not hard. The people of this county really are the heart and soul of everything that works here in Kenosha County. And it's the cooperation between all the different agencies, including obviously the sheriff's department, but the police department, Twin Lakes, Pleasant Prairie. It's the great relationships that we all have with our community. And if you can think back about 5 years ago, when John Morrissey was in office, he called for assistance in the city of Kenosha. And he called other law enforcement agencies. We went in there, the Pleasant Prairie went in there, the State Patrol went in there, because one person told one officer in the city of Kenosha that he said, "It's our city, get out." Well, John Morrissey stepped up and he asked for help, and we flooded the city. We did a press conference right at the corner of 61st and about 20th Avenue. And we put a podium in the middle of the road, and John Morrissey and I spoke, and we said, we're going to come out and we're going to chase out the criminals. I had one person on the side where we were doing, he pulled me over and he said, "You know you're really going to chase some of us out of here." And I said, "That's exactly what our goal is, to chase some of you out of here." And it worked. So we actually took people that were part of the community that John Morrissey said they won't tell us, they're afraid of the neighborhood. I worked 2 different nights with 2 of our deputies in 2-man cars and went out there, and the community supported everything we did. One lady came out of the house and she pointed, "He's right there. Be witnesses, help us, call us, be part of the agencies. Join volunteer departments, but don't be afraid to come out and communicate. Make police officers your friends, because we want to be part of your lives too."
Another question from the audience.
Me?
I have a lot of questions about school safety, shooting safety, fire safety, confusing fire drills with shooting drills, etc. So I'd like to ask you gentlemen to comment on that. And I'm particularly interested in what you think we would do and what your policies would be going forward. But if you want to cover the past, we'll give you time to do that too. Sheriff Beth?
Could you just narrow that down one more time? What school policies are?
for school safety.
Yeah.
With respect to shooters, active shooters.
Okay.
And fire drills and fire alarms have become a part of the issue now because of confusion at one school in the country where people didn't know what to do because they didn't know what alarm was sounding.
Well, as far as I know, there's only one alarm in the schools. And at least in Kenosha County, there's only one alarm in the schools. So what, let's see, so shooters, one of the last shooting incidents we had the suspects, and I don't know if this is where you're going to it, but one of the suspects pulled the fire alarm. And one of the things that schools need to do, and as I look around in here, everyone here has gone through school, and we've always been trained that as soon as that fire alarm goes off, we run blindly out through the school. And what that did in one of the last shootings is he basically started shooting people as they were running for the fire alarms. So what each school has to do is come up with their own safety plan. And we currently teach ALICE. ALICE is being taught in all the county schools. I think it's been taught in all the unified schools. And ALICE teaches you to think about what's going on. Don't hunker down in your room. Don't think that you're safe because you close the door and you pile your kids in the corner of the room. Because what they found in almost all the shootings is when they did that, the intruders came in and they shot people that were just sitting there like you know, they're just sitting there. So ALICE teaches you to fight back, to think about what the situation is. Can you escape? Can you get out a window? Is there people at the other end of the building? Then you can get your class out. If they're coming into your room, can you fight? Can you throw books? There's teachers that I know that have baseball bats in their closets. But fight back. And part of the entire drill is to think about what could happen, what's out there, what are the risks. So each school has to come up with their own plan of what they think they should do. And what they also teach in ALICE is that no two situations are alike. In ALICE, they actually give demonstrations of, okay, if you go into the corner of the room and hide, someone comes in and they shoot you all. What happens if you fight back? What happens if you do something different? So ALICE has been a very, very good program to teach all of our schools.
Mr. Zoerner.
Thank you. The ALICE training has been very good. It does give you many options. Students think the way it's taught in several sections is great. One builds on the next. I think the fire drill that you alluded to was when Sheriff Beth sent a fire drill email or message rather to all the school administrators asking that they change the way they respond to active shooters or their drills. Perhaps pull the fire alarm, have them hunker down, whatever the situation was. The problem was that he didn't address that with any of the school administrators or fire safety professionals, the fire chief, and some of the responses from some of the fire safety people was that even the smallest fire that we had just had recently in the city, the school was so full of toxic materials, if the students had stayed, that there would have been some catastrophic changes, outcomes from that situation. Personally, I am a school safety professional. I was at Wilmot for 4 years of my career, and I had opposing opinions with the school administration there because it's a rural school sometimes. For the thought of saving money, I was propositioned with, don't you think we could get rid of the deputy? Do we really need to have you in the school? And I would say, absolutely, you need me in the school and you need more people in the school. And they would look at me like I was out of my mind. And now as things have progressed and school safety is at the forefront of our minds again, thank goodness. Here we are trying to come up with ways, and in the media we're talking about arming teachers, which I'm not a proponent of, but schools do have, like the sheriff said, schools have to come up with their own plans, and if you're a school administrator and you have multiple people in your school that possibly are a good candidate for assisting, maybe they could receive more training. Reference, when I was at school, we did run self-defense classes and train fighting techniques with some students and staff. There's a lot of ways to help, but absolutely, you have to stick up for yourself and protect your building.
Thank you. Sheriff Beth, do you have a response to that? I was wondering if you had a response to his comment. Whenever a candidate refers to anyone else's past behavior, I always like to give you a chance to respond if you have a response. What about
I'm good.
teachers being armed? How about a quick response from each of you? Should we be training our teachers to shoot people when there's a shooter in the school? How do you feel about that movement? And
I go first?
go ahead.
Question is, how do we feel about teachers being armed, potentially injecting more weapons into possibly a volatile situation? So much to be determined, or so much to be considered when you're talking about doing that. Would I be a proponent of a teacher being armed? Only if that teacher was highly trained, not necessarily, but only if that teacher was highly trained. I had a very unique situation at Wilmot. One of my teachers was a combat veteran, lieutenant colonel in the Army. It was the only teacher there that I would have not had any issue with carrying a weapon. It's a very unique situation, okay? So injecting more weapons into that situation when you have so many students, it seems very unsafe. I think more armed, trained personnel, such as law enforcement.
Sheriff Beth? Army teachers?
I'm going to agree with Dave. My wife's a teacher, and my wife will come out and shoot trap when we do it, but if the thought of her having a gun in school, she would go into a panic mode. And that is not even a thought on my part that a person like my wife, who I love dearly, should never carry a gun in school. If we had retired law enforcement, or as Dave brought up, an ex-military that went through training, I have no issue with that. It would be, in my world, if I would consider that person to be another law enforcement inside the school, then I'd be okay with that. But there'd have to be a screening process in that. It couldn't just be anyone that wanted to carry a gun into school. And I don't know what that process would be. It would truly have to, in my world right now, it'd have to be a ex-law enforcement officer that left in good standing. It'd have to be a military person that left in good standing and still goes and does training. Because carrying a weapon is not something that any law enforcement officer takes lightly. When I've been involved in shootings before, and as much as you would like to believe that, and this was out in the field, this was on Highway 50, this was bank robbers, and we were out in the middle of the field, and in that situation, I had tunnel vision. It was the chase on Highway 50. The car went through the ditch, came back around. I shot the driver through the door. He was shooting at me first. But I could not tell you, as I looked back at that scene and had to give a statement, if anyone else was coming. So I'm talking about cars coming. So it was a very, very stressful situation. And to have someone who doesn't train, who doesn't use it all the time, I picture that being an extreme problem. Even for law enforcement who do train, who do go out and practice all the time, it's a very stressful situation. And so they would have to be highly trained.
Thank you. Now, we've gotten a lot of questions about race relations for this evening, and some of them are pretty detailed. But I'd like to start with one that's rather general. As sheriff, or if you continue as sheriff, what efforts would you implement to improve race relations both within the sheriff's department and throughout Kenosha County? Sheriff Beth.
We have a great relationship throughout our department and throughout the county. We have, let me see. One of the things I'd like to do is get more minorities as law enforcement officers, and we're struggling with that. We try to recruit, and we struggle with getting them in there. In our jail, we have less issue. One of the things we find is that people will rather work where they're accustomed to living. So people who live inside the city are more accustomed to working for a city police department or in the jail, and deputies who maybe lived or grew up in a more rural area. So I'd like to get a more mix of minorities in our patrol division, and we're actually working on that right now. We have about 400 employees. We have about 130 sworn officers. And we get very few complaints. Most letters, most phone calls that I receive are all compliments. And they're from every race, every religion. And I actually brought some statistics, and I guess I have to go from facts. So so far this year, in 2018, our department has written 12,966 citations. 7,900, or 61% of those, are for Caucasians. 62% of those are for males. So the rest of it breaks down into African Americans 26, Hispanics 12%, and the other races are 1. So we have a very good track record of not focusing on any one race that we arrest or cite, and we work well within the city. One thing that I've done is our department has adopted the Frank Neighborhood School, and every year I bring out hundreds of kids to my farm, I feed them, they stay in my house, and we do all kinds of great, wonderful things together for a day on the farm with the Frank kids. Our department has adopted the Wilson School for Christmas. So our inner city schools, our department has been working tremendously to make better lives.
Mr. Zoerner. Thank you. Would you please repeat the question?
What would you be doing in order to improve the relationship with the African American community within the department and within the county?
Okay, thank you.
And I think touching on the idea of having officers, the composition of the deputies reflect the composition of the community was the intent of the questioner, although the statistics on who gets arrested are very important and revealing as well.
Police agencies are supposed to be representative of the community that they serve. That's exactly what you're saying. I think what we need to do as a department is I think we need to solicit the assistance of the agencies in the community. We've seen this recently with the NAACP, CUSH, Hope Council, Boys and Girls Club, all coming together, trying to, actually there's some other faith-based organizations as well, and we've seen them come together, and what we need to do as a department is build collaborative, sustainable relationships with our agency and that part of the community. Like I said, I'm a trainer. I think going to those agencies to make them part of our training protocols and our hiring process would be a tremendous movement towards building those relationships. I've reached out to some members of the community, some key figures, and I believe we have some really neat opportunities ahead of us. I know we can't control the budget as much as we can control our innovation, and I think we have some unique opportunities ahead of us.
Thank you. What's the role of law enforcement in situations of racial tension? And I'd like to include in the minority communities not only African Americans, but various Asian communities, various Latino, Hispanic communities, the LGBTQ plus communities, how deputies deal with situations and how they're trained to be sensitive or not to the issues involved is important. And we have questioners who'd like to know what you would like to do in the future to make whatever situation we have now even better. I think we're with Mr. Zoerner next.
Race relations and how to improve them within the community, not just the first situation we discussed, but moving forward. Again, I think we need to do very specific training in the academy, what we train. I'm sorry to keep going back to that, but it's very much relevant. We put the 8 officers in very specific scenarios and very specific situations. These are students. And we make them live through them. And they have to do role playing in addition to being the officer. So as role players, they have to experience that racism. They have to experience implicit bias, implicit racism. And if you're a senior staff member somewhere, you probably would have had quite a bit of implicit bias training, as the judiciary does, and those types of things. And getting that kind of training into in-service training is very difficult because it's time-consuming and the budgets are what they are. But you have to be committed to it, move forward with all those different agencies in the right trainers. You got to put it together, and you got to spend the money, you got to commit to it, and you have to make it happen.
Sheriff Beth.
After, I'm trying to think, what was the one incident down in, I forget, where it kind of started the riots and things like that. Ferguson, thank you. In Ferguson, we had a small gathering right in front of the safety building, right in front of my office, and they were out there in the all the protesters. It was a very peaceful event, and they were chanting and singing songs, and I went out there, and I started handing out carrot cakes to the people that were there chanting. And I had one of the girls that was there chanting with the group. She goes, "Oh my God, it's Sheriff Beth or Deputy Beth." She goes, "You were my DARE instructor." And I proceeded to continue to hand out carrot cakes to the people in this group, and the organizers up front looked at me and they're like, "You're ruining the entire thing." So I proceeded to hand out just boxes of them. The event went on as they had planned. There was no issues, and it was a very peaceful and good event. About a year and a half ago, we had another one, and I forget what they were doing right by the courthouse. And it was a cold day. I brought out hot chocolate for each and every person that was out there. And I stood with them, and I actually held a sign, and I don't remember what it said, but it wasn't in favor of police. And I showed that police are people too. And as the leader of the sheriff's department, I'm there for you. Whether even if you have issues with us, because I remember when I was asked to be in a jury, they asked, do you think officers are always right? I said, no, we all make mistakes. Sometimes, including myself, your emotions get the best of you, and you have to fix that. So being part of the community, being part of the Frank Neighborhood Project, going to the schools. My daughter, is one of her projects for school, actually collected 1,200 books, and she handed them out 3 or 4 to each and every student at Frank Neighborhood. So we're very active with these issues.
Thank you. It won't be a surprise to either of you that we've received a lot of questions about immigration, ICE, and the county's involvement with it. As I'm sure both of you gentlemen are aware, the ACLU of Wisconsin came out with a report at the end of July this summer, which took a very dim view of how well prepared county sheriff's departments were prepared to deal with the serious issues involved. They pointed out that only 2 counties in Wisconsin, Dodge County and Kenosha, currently lease out parts of the jails to ICE as immigrant detention facilities. We know that this is an economic value to the county. Do you feel that this is the business of Kenosha County? What's your feeling about how this should go in the future? Is it just about the money? I think we're up with Sheriff Beth.
So the question is, should we hold ICE detainees?
Is that the proper role for us to be doing?
Yes. The federal government holds detainees, and detainees are people that are waiting to get deported. Each and every one of the detainees we have in our detention center have committed crimes, and they're waiting to get deported by the federal government. The federal government has asked a few agencies in the Midwest, and we're one, Dodge County is the other one, if we would be willing to hold these detainees waiting to get deported. They aren't inmates. They've already served their time. Some have served their time for various crimes, but there's no one in our jail that hasn't committed a crime, and the federal government has determined that they need to be deported back to the country they come, no matter what country it is. We're kind of like the United Nations. We have got people from all over the world in Kenosha County Jail, in our detention center, that are waiting to get deported back to their country. And we didn't arrest these people initially. Well, some maybe we did. Some maybe we sent to jail because they did some crime here. But most of them come from other parts of the Midwest, and we hold them. We have, since I took office, generated over $85 million. And is it a business? It is. And we treat these people with respect. We offer them the ability to have classes and training and do what they actually have more opportunities than our local population does. And the federal government is going to put them someplace. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to offset our tax dollars by holding these people waiting to get deported to other countries. And if you really think about how far $85 million goes for the Sheriff's Department, it's huge. It has created very good jobs. It has offset law enforcement officers. It has put more deputies on the road. It has done great things for this county, and anybody who lives in Kenosha County has benefited many, many times over.
Thank you. Mr. Zoerner.
Thank you. The idea of $85 million, I'd like to know exactly how that's broken down. I'd like to give the mic back to the sheriff after I state this. $85 million, is that all profit? Or do we have expense incurred from that $85 million? Have we spent $85 million on Kenosha County's law enforcement? Or have we taken care of the detainees and what's left over?
Are you done with your 2.5 minutes?
I am not.
Okay.
Okay. I've been to several immigration information sessions, and the sheriff said that everybody's waiting to be deported. Not all of them get deported. Some of them stay because of credible fears at home, at war in their countries, or if someone is a viable threat to that person. We do not participate in a particular program of going out and searching out the detainees, but we do house them. We've housed up over 300 at a time during my tenure here. What I do at the sheriff's office is I facilitate a lot of these federal contracts. I deal with immigration all day long. We move these detainees to and from Milwaukee and Chicago every day in the AM and in the evening. We make trips out to Gary, Indiana, Rockford, Illinois, for the federal flights, hundreds a week. So when I go to these programs and I hear these people talk about their situations, it's offensive to hear the sheriff talk about how these people have so many opportunities. They don't have that many opportunities. We have a family-based immigration. A lot of people talk about the children being taken away from their parents, and I actually have contacts with immigration. I contact them and find out what's going on because I see the news and I want to know the truth. And they say, don't put me in the paper. Don't put my name on this. We talk about the truth. The reality is that we have family-based immigration, and people want to take the children and they can't do that. It has to be a family member, and sometimes these family members do have crimes, and that is why they're held. I would like to know about the $85 million. I'm
Your
done.
response, Sheriff Beth?
No?
Okay.
No response.
There's one other issue or two that the ACLU report mentioned. They mentioned Kenosha County 2 other times in their report, and it had to do with not having policies, clear policies. They said that Kenosha County is one of 29 counties that has no policy at all dealing with detainers, that is whether or not an ICE detainer has or does not have a judicial warrant. And they also said that Kenosha County, along with 34 others, have no policy with respect to questioning individuals with regard to their immigration status. Do you think we should have such a policy, or is there a policy that is formal or informal in your department that you have or would advocate that wasn't reflected in this study? I think we're ready to start with Mr. Zoerner.
Reference whether or not our detainer policy is clear. I work with this every day. I don't have a policy based on this detainer status that we work with every day. What we do is if there's a detainer situation, we get paperwork from immigration continually throughout the day as to where a detainee is going to be housed, as to what agency is going to take custody of that individual, and as to why. There was recently in Milwaukee County, they sent out a press release that they were no longer going to participate in this. And everyone in our office, and this for about 30 minutes, the whole world said, oh, they're so progressive. Well, the reality of that is that immigration office in Milwaukee is around the corner from the Milwaukee County Jail. And they said they were going to put, literally, it's right there, they were going to put a 3-hour limit on this. And everyone in my office started laughing because they could be over there in 15 minutes to pick up these detainees. So that was very short-lived, good press for Milwaukee County. However, our policy, we deal with this all day long, but we don't have this time limits.
Sheriff Beth?
I've never heard any information or I've not seen this report on what policies we don't have. So to comment on what we do and what we don't have, I guess I'm at a little bit of a loss. If immigration puts a detainer on somebody that has been arrested for a crime, we'll hold them. That's what we do.
You make sure that there's a judicial warrant. I think that's their issue.
We don't bring anybody in unless we have, unless they've committed a crime. So I don't know, we don't.
And the other issue is whether or not you ask people their immigration status.
I don't know that anyone's, I can't say what every single one of our deputies or police officers do, but I don't know that anyone that's ever done it. I know that the federal government had said in the past, they open it up for anyone who wants to do training and be part of their sting operations. We don't have time, we have no burning desire to do that. We have got so many other things to do. We go out and enforce the laws are there. If someone, whether they are here legally or illegally, if they commit a crime, we will pursue them in the exact same fashion. So it really doesn't matter to anyone that I've ever talked to in a department if I don't know that that's an issue. Do we report? We report. We report every single person that comes into our jail facility that if they've been arrested. It's mandated by the federal law. So they get FBI numbers, so we do report.
Thank you. It probably won't surprise either of you to know that we've also gotten a lot of questions about the jail and the staff at the jail. And the story is that we're getting all sorts of emails from people saying that jail staff are going to be forced to work a 12-hour schedule starting in January that employees are not happy with. I think we're ready to start with Sheriff Beth. This apparently is your policy, so do you want to defend it and explain what it really is?
I'd love to explain it. Since Act 10, the jail doesn't have a union. So what I did is I created the Jail Workgroup. In the Jail Workgroup, I take a person from each and every shift to be a representative, including for 2 facilities, first, second, and third. I take a booking clerk, I take a cook, and I take the jail captain, the chief deputy, and the 2 lieutenants for each facility. And that jail group helps us to come up with ways to make things better. And because of that jail group and me pushing a year and a half ago, the county did a study and they got a $2 raise. Some people want to have pink hair, and that's what they brought forward. I said, let's have pink hair. Do nails. This is what we're kind of down to. And every time in the last year and a half, we had several that have quit, and it's always been the schedule. Every time we have a jail work group meeting, which is about every 3 months, they always bring up, let's have a new schedule. So with this jail work group, we came up with an idea, and we pitched it to them, and we said, we can make this work. So this entire jail work group is sitting there, and we told them, what about this? 12-hour days, you work in a 14-day period, you work 7 days. You're off every other weekend. It's going to eliminate most all the overtime. And this jail work group with their representatives, their people, voted unanimously to put this into policy. So with them, I told them, I said, if you guys ever have issue with any of this stuff, you want me to be the bad guy? They said, no, we like this. The jail work group is the ones that went out and said, let's do this. When I stood up and presented this about 2 weeks ago, they stood with me. They were the representatives. They answered the questions, the people of the Jail Workgroup. Most, 95% of the people are thrilled about this because now, every other weekend, they're going to be off. 7 out of 14 days, they're off. Every half the holidays, they're going to be off. There's going to be almost no forced overtime. It's going to eliminate forced overtime, 2 or 3 shifts at our jail every single day. This has almost all, except a few, and I can picture them. I can picture who they are. They don't like it. Everyone else does. And it's going to give them the opportunities they've never had in this position. And they are the ones that voted unanimously, and we said, let's make it work.
Mr. Zoerner.
Thank you. From what I understand, the 12-hour shift mandate comes out in 2019, which is fantastic for the sheriff in the middle of a campaign because this can't be vetted, it can't be proven, can't be seen if it works. But what I do understand is that this program works well if we have a full staff. We do not have close to a full staff. We are short on personnel. So there will be overtime, there will be forced overtime, mandatory overtime. People will come to work and have to stay. That's the way it's been going, that's the way it's going to continue to go. So everyone isn't as enthusiastic about it as the sheriff alludes. The reality is that standing up for 12 hours on concrete floors, dealing with violent felons, might be okay for a 22-year-old male, but we have some older ladies and some older men with health issues. So it's not like 95% of the people are happy about it. They didn't vote on it. A few people in this meeting did. So what we're hearing from him is a program he put together to make himself look good, and everyone there isn't happy about it. I'm not happy about it either. My office is down there by them, and I listen to it all day long. I empathize with them very much.
Now, I'd like to move on, since we talked about short-staffed. You've been seeking new recruits, and at the end of August, there was another story in the paper that although you just hired your biggest crew of new recruits since 1978, you weren't done yet, and that you were accepting applications through September 8th. How's that going? Are you filling the vacancies? What's the outlook? Is that going to improve the balance of people who are on the force? Are we going to see more people, more diversity? How's that going, and will that solve this problem, Mr. Zoerner?
Are you specifically talking about jail hiring or deputy hiring?
All of the above.
Okay. We are hemorrhaging personnel at the sheriff's office, and we have been for quite some time. The jail is always a revolving door, but we're seeing something in the sheriff deputies that we haven't seen before. They're leaving as well. Some of our most talented deputies are walking out the door. They're applying for jobs in other departments based on pay or what have you, but they all have their own reason. So there are currently 2. One's leaving for Franklin, allegedly, and one's probably going to Lake County. I said, well, 2, okay, well, we're going to have to work hard to fix that because they're very talented guys, but we'll be able to do it. And then a deputy came in later and said, there's actually 6 of our deputies on the list for Lake County. I don't think the sheriff knew there was 6. I think that's indicative of what's going on. We have a mass exodus at the sheriff deputy level that we've never seen before. A couple will leave for different careers, but when they're going to other departments right around here, it's just like what goes on with the jail. We train them, we run all kinds of special programs to get more bodies in there, and as soon as they're trained, they're working for Racine County. So, although we are continually hiring, we're continually losing as well.
Thank you.
I guess he doesn't realize that in our jail, we're only 1 person down right now. We're basically at full staff in our jail facilities. And part of the issue is FMLA, accident and sickness, workers' comp. That's always an issue. We were able to rethink that today's generation is different than some of the older people that are here. There's a few people in this room that have been their jobs for decades. And some of our younger ones, they don't have, I I guess when I got this job, I thought I'm going to be here forever till I retire. I thought of retirement. I thought of a lot of different things. The new generation really doesn't always think like that. And it doesn't help anything that the county doesn't help with benefits. It doesn't help with retirement. Things have changed. Law enforcement, I was at a meeting with Gateway today, and every agency at the table today, whether they were in Walworth County, Racine County, or Kenosha County, we're all facing the exact same things. Hundreds of people used to apply when I was a deputy sheriff. We had 146 people apply a couple weeks ago and tested 65. And people are very transient. Our list used to last 18 months. Our list from May lasted, we're just testing again. So the current atmosphere of law enforcement in the area, in the country, doesn't lead the average person coming out of school and college to want to be a deputy or a police officer. And I've never heard anyone say as they're going through school, I want to be a jailer when I grow up. It doesn't happen. It is a demanding spot. It's a difficult spot. It's a decent spot. It's a good paying spot. But for a lot of people, it's a stepping stone toward law enforcement, and we lose a lot of people. And we actually just changed our civil service ordinance to give them a step up to hire them into our department, and actually what we're doing. So things are much more transient than they used to be. And our wages for the county, which I have no control over, aren't as good as some other departments. So it's a bit of a challenge, but we're getting take-home cars, and we're starting that program this year, which we've already kind of started. But there's a lot of programs we're trying to do to make improvements.
Thank you.
To change topics a bit, a couple of our audience members have sent in questions with respect to chases, police chases, and people would like to know how you feel, each of you, with respect to these high-profile chases. In 2015, we had the Andrew Obregon case. At the very beginning of this year, we had the Tommy Hilfiger store robbery. What should be done to protect the public and to protect officers in these situations? I think we're ready to start this time with Mr. Sheriff Beth.
Chases are one of our most dangerous things that law enforcement can get involved in. And I started off a while ago talking about a chase where I got into a gunfight with two bank robbers, and it creates tunnel vision. What supervisors have to do and what other law enforcement has to do is they have to be the eyes and the ears of every pursuit. There was a pursuit that went up the interstate, and the deputies were saying it's over 100 miles an hour. It's 4:30 in the afternoon, and I got it and I said, call off the pursuit. It's not going to go on. And we did. I found out later, thank goodness, it was a drug dealer, and we actually had something on the car to track him, so that it worked out okay. But supervisors have to be very involved, and a lot of times when people take off in a pursuit, they don't care either. They get tunnel vision as well. Most of the time in a pursuit, it'll end up in some sort of an accident. Most of the time, those accidents are single car accidents, but it isn't always that way. And we as a department are at different levels of liability liable for the accident. So that's why it's so important for us to be active as a supervisor and even as another deputy sheriff in a backup position of monitoring what's going on. Because that deputy is focusing on that car, the car right behind him needs to focus on what the surroundings are. The supervisor needs to know, is he going through the Tremper High School 85th Street and its school's closing? Is it 3 o'clock in the morning? Everything has to be evaluated during the entire pursuit. Where is it going? What speeds are they going? What is this involving? Is it for a traffic citation? Did this person just kidnap somebody? Did this person just shoot somebody? So there are so many particulars that have to be taken into consideration for each and every pursuit. Milwaukee canceled their pursuit policy and they found that it wasn't working. They found that what was happening was that people, it gave them the ticket to flee. They changed it back, and I agree with them. But that does not take away the liability and the risk that goes with each and every pursuit or the department and how they handle it.
Mr. Zoerner.
Can you repeat the question, please?
There have been some high-profile crime chases over the past few years. What should be done to make sure that these are conducted properly to protect the public as well as the officers?
Okay, thank you. We discussed this in the forum we had earlier. We had a similar question, but it was basically on hot pursuit. The sheriff, I agree with the sheriff. You have to have every agency needs to have a pursuit policy. If, like what happened in Milwaukee County, everyone runs away. It's horrible. I have been a supervisor on patrol, and unfortunately for my deputies that I worked with, I'm not a big fan of high-speed chases. People get hurt very quickly. But like I've said before, everything is relative. So as the sheriff alluded to, what is the chase for? What probable cause does the deputy have? Is it just for traffic? What time of day is it? Where are we? You know, when I worked third shift patrol and I was in several high-speed chases, it was the middle of the night. So that's a little bit different set of circumstances than in the city during the day. So I agree with the sheriff on this. You have to be very cognizant of the fact of what's going on around you.
It sounds like you both believe that supervision and training are extremely important, and I mean real-time supervision at the beginning and during every moment of the pursuit. Is that correct? How do you train people to do that, Sheriff Beth? What kind of a process do you? I just wanted to follow up. I don't care who answers first on this one. How do you train people to do that, to make sure it happens? It's easy to say.
Every deputy on the road understands supervigilance. You have to be completely cognizant of what's going on around you. That's one of the reasons supervisors have to overwatch what's going on. On our monitors right in the sergeant's office, if there's not a supervisor on the road, which isn't very common, you can see when a squad is running, or when a squad is traveling down the highway, you can see the speed of that squad right on top of the vehicle. So the supervisor has pretty realistic data right there, right? And all the deputies understand supervigilance. However, as the sheriff alluded to, tunnel vision, that happens during a chase. So supervisors have to stay on top of it. The deputies that are patrolling nearby that chase get into the pursuit also, and then the person chasing the first vehicle stops calling out. The second vehicle starts doing radio traffic, so the person pursuing right behind that car can focus on that one car.
Sheriff Beth, do you want to follow up on how you actually make this happen and improve that control process?
One thing we've been doing over the last few years is adding one sergeant to first, second, and third shifts. This gives us the opportunity to have a sergeant on the road or a lieutenant on the road. And it also, they have monitors in the offices. When they're not by their desk, they carry their portable radios and they listen. Dispatch is very aware of, obviously dispatch is very aware of a pursuit that's going on. So what they would do, as soon as a pursuit would start, they would call or they would get on the radio to make sure that the supervisor is aware of it, and they make notification, and the supervisor starts monitoring it and starts asking the particulars of it. The dispatchers are also trained to find out information as well. Dispatchers will go, maybe they know the call that already started for service. Maybe they're aware that this was, a kidnapping or domestic violence or something, or maybe it was an Andy Obregon, and we got the car description and we found him. And so it's a team effort by the deputies on the road, it's a team effort by dispatch, and it's a team effort by the supervisors. And I'll drift back to Obregon. Whenever something would happen, the supervisors in the sergeant's office would give a call, really a call to everybody. And we had, I can just think of the last time we had a pursuit, we had 10 supervisors in the sergeant's office listening and directing. That pursuit ended up going, actually it started in Illinois and never came back here. But it's a team effort. And I can't say that there's a real good training process, but as Dave brought up, when you're on the road, you get this tunnel vision, and you know that other people have to get involved. more than one person has to be aware of what's going on, what you're going to do, and at what time. And the deputies have to be very aware that the supervisor is in charge. And if they say, cancel the pursuit, it's done.
I have a question that's a little bit on the lighter side, but very important, and then we're going to go to closing statements after this. There are a lot of bicycles on the road today and a lot of motorcycles, and there are going to be more and more. I think we can count on that. I'm sure both of you gentlemen agree. We got some bicycle lanes now. What about bicycle safety, training not only drivers of automobiles and trucks, but also the riders of the bicycles and the motorcycles? What would you recommend that we do in the future to try to improve the safety for these people? Because they're a little more vulnerable. They're not surrounded by steel. I think Sheriff Beth is up.
Yeah. I get that question a lot. And you know, most of the time, at least in the county, it's not necessarily the kids that are out there breaking the laws. It's adults that are out there going through stop signs. And that's really one of the big ones that I see is adults they have the same rules of the road as we have to follow. So when I'm on the radio, or we do, usually at the radio, I guess, that is one of the topics that I'll bring up, is bike safety, but they also have to follow the rules. They do a bike race around Bong Recreational Area, and one thing is I'll stop there and talk to the people that are set up. I said, please enforce, or please tell the people who are racing, they got to follow the rules too. And I can't really think that our deputies give too many people citations for bikes, and I don't really want to see that start. But education, doing trainings, promoting on the radio, promoting it in newspaper articles. Maybe we can get, we work very closely with the media. Maybe we can get TV stations to come down and do a real quick training, we'll do a demonstration of what bike riders need to do too. Whether they actually follow those rules, I don't know. And like I said, a lot of it isn't the kids. It's adults that should know better, and they still do it.
Thank you, Mr. Zoerner.
Thank you. The bicycles have changed quite a bit over the past decade. So many are motorized. It's not like a moped that you would see purchased from a dealership, but these bicycles are being outfitted with motors. And I'm sure everyone here, if you're driving, you've seen these vehicles fly past you. Obviously, our position in law enforcement isn't legislative. We don't create laws. However, if something could be done about mandating helmets for particular age groups, et cetera, especially if it's a motorized vehicle. Some of these vehicles have 80cc engines on them and they travel 50 miles an hour, and they are nothing more than a bicycle. That is very dangerous. When I was patrolling about a decade ago, if a motorized vehicle was on the street and didn't have lights, all the working lights, there were a litany of citations. Well, that's all been decriminalized because of this new industry. So we see how business shapes things. So I'm a tremendous advocate for kids wearing helmets on their bicycles. However, we can't mandate these things. So you as citizens have to do that. You have to make a movement. The sheriff talked about earlier being involved in your community, going to the media. That would be a fantastic idea. I'm all for it, and I see other officers shaking their heads when I talk about those vehicles. They're very scary to me, so I wouldn't let my children drive them.
Thank you very much. We're going to ask each candidate now to make their closing statement, and the first closing statement will be given by Mr. Zoerner, and then Sheriff Beth will follow, and I'm going to allow the audience to show their appreciation for these gentlemen throwing their hats in the ring by applauding after each of those closing statements. And we're going to begin with a closing statement from Mr. Zoerner. Why do you want people to vote for you?
Thank you. Again, thank you for everyone for coming tonight, and thank you for Forward Kenosha for having the event. Appreciate it. Thank you, Sheriff Beth, for attending. I'd like to thank my wife for putting up with me. This has been very stressful on her, and my mother-in-law as well. Thank you. Service and giving back is a way of life for me. It just comes natural. It always has. As I stated throughout my career, I work diligently, go above and beyond. I've always strived to do better. I pushed myself professionally with the teaching, the training, doing presentations, being a voluntary speaker, and I've worked with every agency in the community well. The relationships that I've developed, they're imperative. I think they're going to be imperative in correcting some of the crisis that the Sheriff's Department is in. I've made building collaborative relationships a priority, and they're sustaining, they're working. People are still seeking me out. I addressed that because, as I alluded what I stated in the newspaper when I announced my candidacy, that's not been the case with our current administration. A major endeavor to undertake is going to be rebuilding a mutual respect between the entire community and our law enforcement agency. I've already begun working on that. I've already begun collaborating with some key figures, like I said earlier, and it's working. It's going to be great. $85 million is not the amount of money the Kenosha community has realized. When I gave the sheriff the opportunity to discuss that, he said no comment. I think that's telling. Talked about Obregon several times. We've never really talked about it. Andy Obregon, Susan Obregon, and the relationship the sheriff has with them, I didn't like it at all. Sheriff talked about Andy Obregon on television repeatedly. That he said that Andy's not a threat to the community. Well, Andy's a terrible threat to the community. We were pursuing him for homicide. He shot a man in the head. Sitting sheriff of decades says he's not a threat. I didn't understand that. That was exacerbated. What I'd like to do, I'd like to apologize to one of his victims who's here tonight, that she had to endure what she endured. I'm sorry you had to track me down at the county fair. I'm sorry I wasn't more available to you. And I'm sorry you've had so many surgeries on your eye and that you've now lost vision in that eye. I felt Andy was a threat the entire time. And for him to say he wasn't a threat was ridiculous. He almost killed that woman just a couple days later. I'm asking you to support me as Kenosha County Sheriff. I will stick up for everybody in this community, not just my friends and family, not just people who look like me, for all of you. That's who I am, and that's what I'm going to do. Please vote for me on November 6th.
Sheriff Beth.
As you can see from the last hour and a half, the difference is night and day. Experience sits on this side of the table. When you talk about you've been a school resource officer for a year or two, and then you help with one school's plan, and then you help supervise some people that do trips. Things that I'm responsible for. Created the Canine Unit, Traffic Interdiction Unit, the ATV and Snowmobile Unit, Take-Home Squad program, which we're doing, electronic monitoring. K-Dog was started by myself and John Morrissey. Part-time correctional program, which we're working now. Work with all Kenosha City schools to obtain school grants. I did. Got the Bearcat. Purchased that with drug dealers' money. We closely work with 4 different communities to be their contract police agency. We work with these agencies. We give them, because they have to have contracts, or actually Bristol and Paddock Lake don't, but they choose to. If they created their own departments, it would cost them millions of dollars. We do it for substantially less. We work with them extremely closely. We have added more deputies to the road. And I'm going to talk about the $85 million, but I'm not going to have him ask me about it. It wasn't his question. $85 million over that time has paid for more deputies on the road. It has paid for correctional officers to watch our local people. It has paid for squad cars. It has paid the bills of our department. It has kept it running, and what it has done is it allowed me to work with the county board and the county executive over the last 15 years to average about 1.7% tax levy increases every year. That's what we averaged, less than 2%. That $85 million did that. And I guess everyone doesn't understand it. Our grants, since I took office, are over $10 million. We have got over $10 million to help subsidize deputies, programs in our jail, helping keep recidivism down. $10 million, that's a huge amount of money that we've gone after. In the last, there it is, since I took office, we have given back to Kenosha County taxpayers at the end of unspent money $5.249 million. At the end of 15 years, we've not spent. Some years we go a little over, some years we're under. It's just the way budget's a process. But we have done a fantastic job. 16 years ago, I came in, I said, we're gonna run this place, the Sheriff's Department, as a business. And I have. I have a small business, and I work it. I work our department. How can we generate money? How can we put the best people forward? How can we do all kinds of things that we want to do in this county to protect Kenosha? How can we do that at the most reasonable price? And we've done that at less than 2% increases a year. I don't know of any other department in the state of Wisconsin that could even come close to saying that. So where did $85 million go? It's simple. To give you, the county, the Sheriff's Department, the jail, all the things that we need to solve crimes, to catch bad people and to hold them. It's to keep all that, and it's to give good jobs to people while they're doing it. We work with, if you talk to any police chief in Kenosha County, they will tell you how close we work together. If you talk to any village or town, they will tell you how closely we all work together. If you talk to the city of Kenosha, talk to the mayor. Mayor says, we get along fantastic with the sheriff and the Sheriff's Department. County executive says, Sheriff's Department all the way. You're a great leader. District attorney, we work closely together with programs. Emergency management, the county executive, we work so closely together that the county executive actually placed county emergency management under the Sheriff's Department. We run emergency management. Awesome responsibility, and we work in collaboration with the county executive. Me and my family, I'm glad Dave thanked his wife, because it is a huge toll. My wife's not here. She had to go to my daughter's National Honor Society thing. I'm very proud of that part, but it takes a huge toll. And the wives and the friends and the families and the moms and the dads, it's a huge toll. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you both. Thank you, Jerry. And thanks to our audience for making a lot of questions, both before and tonight. Get out there and vote. Good night.